what I see a lot in our work is where those mid-level leaders feel, in some ways, they feel threatened, they feel defensive about those informal check-ins, that this is going to be an indictment on them, or that if they create that open culture of where we really welcome and invite input, that somehow their role or their relevance might be threatened. What would you say to those mid-level leaders that are just a little bit leery about inviting all of that input?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, it's absolutely consistent with Amy Edmondson's work, which is super powerful. And I would also say that, as Amy would say, safety is necessary but not sufficient. And same thing, a growth mindset is necessary but not sufficient. So with a growth mindset, the belief is necessary for us to engage in the behaviors, but we also need to know the how to, right? The strategies. In safety, people might feel safe to share, but there might, in some cultures, people feel very safe, but there's still no impetus to take on challenges or to solicit feedback or to grow, which takes effort. And so we, in addition to feeling safe, we also need to normalize and to push ourselves to grow, right? And to say this is important for us to get better. So yeah, we need to feel safe, but we also need to actually habituate and systematize the behaviors in order to improve. And so for the mid-level managers, that is something that I have found as well. When I survey organizations, one thing that I have found in different organizations is that people who feel the safest to engage in learning behaviors tend to be the novices, the people who are just entering the organization, and the most senior people. So the novices, I think, they're just entering the organization, is kind of understood by everybody that they're going to need to learn. They're going to need to figure out how the organization works, how to do their job, and that is normal, that is expected. For the most senior people, they feel safe because of their seniority, right? They have gotten there, they have the status. And the people in the middle do tend to feel the least safe because they might feel, I'm supposed to know how to do things already, right? I've been in this organization for several years. I'm supposed to know things. And so working on this, right, and having these conversations and this clarity that every individual, even the most senior, right, no matter how many years we've been doing on the job, we can always continue to get better. That's what Olympic gold medalists do, even though they're the best in the world. And so for somebody individually to really reflect on this and think about, am I trying to be perfect and to perceive myself as perfect? And might that be problematic? Might that be, hindering my continued growth? And so if that's true, then we have to figure out a solution around that, right? And if we feel like our culture is not safe, like, we're going to be punished if we're not perfect, then we might need to engage in those learning zone behaviors in private, not with other people. That's not the best way to do it. But if I feel like, there's only sharks around me, I might need to create a safe island, whether that is with the people who are closest to me in my teams, or maybe with a peer group outside of my organization, right? And then I can think about what are ways that I can influence my organization over time, if that's how I feel. Or maybe those sometimes are assumptions that we have in our mind, and they're not true in other people's minds. So if we actually check these assumptions with other people and think about, how do we want to make everything perfectly in this organization, or do we sometimes want to take risks? And what happens when we take a risk and it doesn't go as hoped? And if we check those assumptions, maybe other people might be on the same page as we are, but we just assume that they don't want us to ever experiment with something that doesn't work, for example, where they might actually want us to experiment. And so for those are things to think about. But for the senior leaders, it's really important to make all those assumptions explicit, right? So sometimes we keep these implicit assumptions in our minds and we don't share, hey, we want to take risks, we want to experiment. Sometimes things will go as hoped, sometimes not, but we're going to learn from that. So when are we going to do that? How are we going to share what we're learning? When do we not want to do that because the stakes are high? When do we want to just focus on what we know works? And making those implicit assumptions explicit is something that we need to do a lot more frequently than we think. Sometimes we we think, okay, this is our culture, and we just communicate it, and then we think that everybody will remember that every day because we said it once. But leaders are 9 times more likely to be perceived as under communicative than over communicative. So we need to make our implicit assumptions explicit a lot more frequently than we think.